Hi there, and welcome back. Today, I wanted to talk about how we get our money down to Mexico for our home build and other projects in Michoacan. And if you haven't already, I'd recommend checking out the previous video on our process of constructing a beachside homestead in rural Mexico from the United States. But here I'll be including what we've learned about sending money to Mexico. So this will be an overview of how we do it and what tools we've used, as well as the big mistakes that we've made. So I'm super happy this video has reached you. And if you have questions along the way, don't hesitate to put them in the comments for me to answer as best as I can. First, we can't start a video about sending money to Mexico without touching on the exchange rate between the US dollar and the Mexican peso. And if you don't need this kind of an overview and already understand a little bit about the exchange rate, then feel free to skip over this part. But I wanted to start with that because when we understand a little bit about how that works, we then can understand the necessity behind the need to find the best exchange rate offer, and it becomes, a part of our broader pursuit to become better stewards of our money and our investments, which for folks like us spans internationally, not just to one nation. So we are opened up actually to even more risk and challenge because of that simple fact that we are sending money across borders, whether it be for like a home build like us or sending money to family members, etc. And it goes without saying that since we started our home build project in Mexico 5 years ago, we have seen some pretty big swings in the US dollar to Mexican peso exchange rate. And you can see that in this chart here. But most recently, we've seen the Mexican peso getting stronger and the US dollar getting much weaker. And that creates some mixed emotions personally for Marco and I, because it means that at the moment, our American money is not stretching as far as it used to. But more importantly, it means that Mexico's economy is quite healthy. And should that trend continue, that makes us very excited for not only us and our future plans there, but also for the future of our family that lives there now and for the people of Mexico as a whole. Should, like I said, should that trend continue, but it changes every day, so we'll see. And when you see that change in currency, like what we're seeing in Mexico, it means that the economy is getting stronger, which equates to a stronger job market and higher rates of success across the board. So, like I said, this trend is positive for us despite the hit to our American bank accounts. What it means that our US dollars aren't going as far as they used to looks like this. And I'm giving some visual examples. In 2021, when we started developing our property in Mexico, $1 was equal to about 20 pesos. So, in order to purchase a bag of cement, which in Mexico costs about 100 pesos, you needed $5. Fast forward to today, about 5 years later, $1 is now equal to only 18 pesos. And actually, by the time that this video is posted, it could be lower or greater, I'm not sure. But at this point, we're talking around, hovering around 18 pesos, okay? So this means that that bag of cement that costs 100 pesos now requires $5.55 to buy. That is an 11% increase in your expense for that bag of cement. And we have not even included inflation on that bag of cement, which is also increasing your costs at the same time. And then imagine scaling it to an entire construction project that can really change your budget of what you were forecasting. So This is a super simplified example, but it gives you an idea how the fluctuating exchange rates are going to impact your financial goals in another country. We check the exchange rate nearly every day to try and strategize our payments for the best results. And here's another example. Say we needed to pay 40,000 pesos a month to our builder and the exchange rate was 20 pesos to the US dollar, like it was in 2021. Then we would send a payment of $2,000, not including transfer fees, for that first month, which would equal the expected payment of 40,000 pesos getting to the builder. But if the following month, for that second payment, the US dollar dropped and was now only equal to 18 pesos, our payment that next month would need to be $2,222 in order to be able to pay our builder the expected monthly payment of 40,000 pesos. If we only sent 2,000 like the previous month, $2,000, he would only receive 36,000 pesos, meaning we'd be short on our payment and we'd have a pretty ticked off builder. Now that we understand a little more about the exchange rate, we can start to explore options for sending your American money to Mexico. And the first major point on this is that you can't send money without having a place to send it to. Ideally, you will have your own bank account if you are a Mexican citizen or permanent resident. But if that's not the case, then another option is to send to a family member's bank account or somebody's bank account that you trust. And I want to really stress that this person should be somebody trustworthy. For example, when we first got started spending money on projects in Michoacan, Marco's mom let us use one of her bank accounts to send money to, which she then withdrew in order to pay our contractors down there in person. But a better way to send money for services in Mexico is to directly send your payment to the bank account of the contractor or business providing the service. So many builders and tradesmen will be happy actually to give you their banking details that are required to make the transfer right to their account. And we also did it this way for a long time before my husband set up his own Mexican bank account. And we really only had problems with that method if the particular contractor we used didn't have their own bank account, which actually is not as uncommon as you'd think in rural areas. But in that case, the contractor would provide the bank account details of a family member, like a spouse or an adult child. But now that Marco has a Mexican bank account with BBVA, and there's many banks down there to choose from, but he has one with BBVA, and we send our money there. He uses BBVA's personal banking app to transfer our money domestically from his Mexican BBVA account to the Mexican bank account of the contractors and businesses we use, all while being here in Oregon. So let's circle back to physically getting that money to Mexico in the first place. There are many, many international money transfer apps to choose from, all offering different exchange rates and fees and promotional discounts. So as the fiscally prudent person that I am, I'm not ashamed to say that I, shop around to find the best deal and change which apps I use if one comes on the market that's better. We never use the Mexican tiendas here in the US that offer envíos de dinero, nor do we ever use the physical American banks like Wells Fargo, Chase, etc. to make transfers because they're typically not going to offer the most competitive and best exchange rate, and they're going to have higher fees. And as we saw in the bag of concrete example, it is very important to use the service that will provide the best exchange rate so your money can go as far as possible. You might be wondering why different establishments and companies offer different exchange rates if there is only one official currency exchange rate at any given moment. But this is because these banks and companies and stores are businesses. And so they do add a markup on top of the official exchange rate so that they can make a profit and stay in business. And of course, the other transfer fees. So they make their money. And that's why you need to make it a priority to shop around a little in order to choose the best money transfer provider for your needs. Please note, I'm not promoting any of the money transfer apps that I'm about to go over. I'm just sharing our experience with the ones we've used so far. The transfer app we started with and used for years was Remitly, and we've recently switched to Boss Money because their exchange rate had the lowest markup, and they were offering a promotion where your first 5 transfers are not charged a transfer fee. And just to be honest, once we pass that promotion and we reach the 5 transfers, I'm probably going to start shopping around for a new transfer app because that's just the way I am. But other major international transfer apps include OFX, TransferWise, WorldRemit, Zoom, etc., many others. And to get set up on an app, you'll need to provide your personal information, including US government issued ID like a driver's license. And they will also likely call you on the phone when you're getting set up. And this is to ask you a few questions to verify that you are who you say you are and that no fraud is happening. But if your English is not strong, don't worry, they are international companies, so they have plenty of bilingual representatives. And after that, then you will have to link your funding source, which would be the American bank account that you are sending money from. And finally, you'll need your funding destination, which is the Mexican bank account, details where the money will be received. Most transfer apps also have the option of using debit cards instead of bank account numbers for both the funding source and funding recipient. And if you set it up this way using your debit card, the transfer will complete in less than a day, sometimes under an hour even, because it's being charged like a purchase to your debit card. And otherwise, if you use bank account details to transfer from, it can take a couple of days because the transfer is operating more like a wire, bank to bank. So using debit cards for faster transfers has been our go-to method. And don't worry, you can keep many recipients saved in your transfer app account, so you don't need to re-enter information every time you send money. One tip we have for sending money to a new recipient is to do a smaller, like, test amount before sending a big chunk of money, just to make sure that everything goes through okay, because some banks have certain settings on new transactions that are in large quantities that can lock down the account on either the sender side or the recipient side. So because it's just a large amount being transferred or received in a new way, and that's happened to us before, which slows down getting payment to your contractor. So that's something to keep in mind. Is a smaller test amount is always good to do, just to make sure it lands where it needs to land. And I also want to stress here that it is super, super, super important to always double and triple check your recipient's information that you've entered, especially if you're like switching to a new transfer app and are re-entering recipient's information into the new app, things like that. And I know it goes without saying, but we once did have a typo in a Mexican bank account number that we were entering, and we sent it too fast before double checking, and $1,000 went out into the Mexican banking abyss instead of to the guy who was installing our windows on our house in Michoacan. And yeah, needless to say, we were unable to reverse it with the banks, and that was $1,000 that was just lost due to rushing. And I always tell my husband when I just hope it landed with somebody who needed it and who really needed a miracle. But that is my cautionary tale to all who are sending money anywhere, whether it be Mexico or, another country or even here in the United States, right? So, with international money transfer apps, it is important to note that they have varying limits for day to day transfers and accumulated transfers over periods of time. These are going to be unique to each app's product design and offerings. So you just want to be sure that you research those limits a little bit and understand those details. For example, what I'm talking about is with both Remitly and Boss Money, we've found that the max amount you are able to send in a 24-hour period is $2,999. So they want to keep you under a $3,000 limit. That being said, you can certainly send more than those limits. For example, Remitly does allow you to send up to $100,000 in one transaction, but they will require you to go through further verification procedures for your identity and your funding sources because they just want to ensure that there's no fraud or tax evasions. And, when you start sending bigger amounts over borders, they get a little squirrely. So that's why we always remained within the lower tiered limits and just try to avoid those headaches. And also, something to keep in mind is that just like with bringing physical cash across borders, the IRS regulates transactions of $10,000 or more. So if you do plan to send quantities of that amount or higher, that's totally fine. Just don't forget that it will likely get flagged for reporting to the IRS, which will just trigger IRS procedures for tax and fraud review, right? So these are all little but very important rules and details that you should know and research a little more before starting to send money abroad, especially. But I'm not a licensed CPA, nor am I formally educated in like international tax law. So if you do plan to send larger quantities to Mexico at a time, I recommend you meet with a tax advisor to find out if you'll have any additional obligations and just get those kinds of questions answered. And if you already have a Mexican bank account or are planning to get a Mexican bank account, then it will, of course, feel much nicer transferring your own money from the US to your own account in Mexico. But please remember that these limits and IRS rules will still apply. And it doesn't matter that it's going to your own account and that you're essentially paying yourself or whatever, but they do still apply. So you'll want to make sure you understand them. And if you are planning to get your own Mexican bank account that you plan to use and send money to, I have a pro tip. First, be sure to get a Mexican cell phone if you don't have one already with a Mexican phone number and load it with a little bit of money for text and data when you buy it. Because just like our banks here in the US sometimes text us verification codes to be able to access our bank accounts online, Mexican banks do too, but they will only naturally operate with a Mexican cell phone number. So I just want to prevent anyone from opening their Mexican bank account, then coming back to the United States and having no way to log in and access your money because you didn't bring back your Mexican cell phone. We keep our Mexican cell phone here at our house in Oregon because we've occasionally needed it, of course, to be able to log into our Mexican bank account online or move money from it. And also, when we go back and visit Mexico, we take it along there too. And it's actually been super helpful with setting up other types of accounts and programs in Mexico as well that require a Mexican phone number. But ours is just a cheap Motorola smartphone, but it works like a pay-as-you-go phone. And it's super easy to load money onto from your Mexican bank account once it's set up. And we've done it here in the United States without problems. So you'll want to also always keep a minimum amount of money loaded on your Mexican phone in order to keep the chip active, like $5 at least every couple of months or so. Marco also wanted me to make sure that I shared with you all that a really nice advantage of having a Mexican bank account is that you can pay larger material suppliers as your contractor is there ordering materials. Because these larger, more sophisticated companies, material suppliers in Mexico, use WhatsApp actually to facilitate payments, and they will actually send you your bill via WhatsApp when your contractor is there making the order, and then you can immediately pay it from your Mexican bank account using their instructions, which typically includes like putting the order number in the deposit notes of the bank transfer. And you can do all that while being in another country if you want. So, and the payment is instant. So doing this method when you can is beneficial to you, but also to your contractor so that he or she does not have to handle all your material payments for you. So it just kind of streamlines that process a little bit, having a Mexican bank account. I hope this overview of how to send money to Mexico has been insightful, but most of all, useful if you are especially in the planning stages of realizing a dream of moving to Mexico, whether for the first time or as an ultimate return home. So if you have gotten anything out of this video, please like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on more videos like this.